The thing about real power is that it's always low-key. It doesn't need to flex. To my son, Leo, I was just Eleanor Vance. Ellie to my few friends. Just a mom who worked in an office, wore sensible shoes, and lived in a cozy but totally unflashy two-bedroom apartment that hadn't been renovated since the late 90s. He was 34, and in all those years, he'd never once figured out that the woman who cooked his favorite chili and complained about the rising cost of gas was actually running a multi-billion-dollar logistics corporation. I was, to put it plainly, the CEO. I pulled down a salary that most people wouldn't see in a decade, $95,000 a month, before bonuses, stock options, and my side investments. I've been at the top of the food chain for 18 years. My lifetime earnings? We're talking north of $25 million in gross income. I've signed off on contracts that shifted the global supply chain, decided the fate of whole divisions, and sat in rooms where a single sentence from me could tank a stock. But I never told Leo. Never. Why the stealth wealth? It wasn't a game, not at first. My childhood had been tough, full of empty promises and people who only saw the dollar signs attached to my potential. I got rich in silence because I learned that true dignity isn't a designer label, it's a quiet confidence. And I wanted Leo to be raised by that confidence, not by a trust fund. I wanted him to hustle, to earn, to be a man who valued grit over guilt. Money, left unchecked, can make people soft and stupid. I wasn't going to let that happen to my kid. So I drove an ancient Ford pickup, bought my jeans at consignment shops, and kept my $1 million art collection locked away in a climate-controlled warehouse downtown, miles away from my simple fifth-floor walk-up. It was a whole vibe, an ongoing social experiment. The call came Tuesday afternoon, right as I was about to greenlight a massive Q4 acquisition. I saw Leo's name flash on my cracked iPhone screen, a 2-year-old model, obviously. I waved off my executive team and took the call. "Hey, kiddo, what's up?" I kept my voice light, the voice of a slightly weary but loving suburban mom. He sounded weird, strained. "Mom, hey, look, I need to ask you something. It's a thing. Char's parents, Julian and Serafina, they finally flew in from overseas. They're here for 2 weeks, and they want to meet you. We're doing dinner on Saturday. Super fancy place, downtown." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't the tone of a son who was proud to introduce his mom. It was the tone of a guy bracing for an awkward social event. The tone of someone desperate for a favor, a plea not to be embarrassing. "Oh, that's great, Leo. The in-laws, huh? Do they know anything about me?" I asked, my voice flat, like I was discussing the weather. I knew the answer, but I needed to hear him say it. There was a long, gulping silence on the line. I heard him sigh, the sound scratchy over the phone. "Look, Mom, I told them you work in an office, like administrative stuff. I said you live alone in a small apartment. And, I said you're pretty simple." Simple. The word hit me like a splash of cold water, that miserable, patronizing adjective, as if my entire hard-won existence, all my blood, sweat, and billion-dollar decisions could be neatly contained in one word that meant insufficient. It felt like he was apologizing for me, preemptively smoothing over his mother's shortcomings so she wouldn't mess up his picture-perfect marriage to the bougie Char. I took a deep, slow breath, a trick I learned decades ago in a particularly vicious board meeting. "It's cool, Leo. I get it. Simple. Okay, I'll be there. Where is this 5-star joint?" He rattled off the address. The Gilded Crane, an ultra-exclusive old money establishment in the ritziest part of the city, the kind of place where the waiters wear white gloves and you could lose your retirement savings on a single bottle of Bordeaux. I hung up and stared out my window at the familiar rain-streaked skyline. In that moment, A switch flipped. If my son was convinced I was a poor, pathetic nobody, and if his wife's entitled parents were flying across the globe ready to size me up and find me wanting, then I was going to give them the show of a lifetime. I would lean into the stereotype. I would be broke, naive, and utterly desperate, a mother barely scraping by, an anchor dragging down their precious social standing. I didn't want to just expose them. I wanted to experience it firsthand, to feel the sting of their judgment, to confirm the suspicion that had been gnawing at me since Leo and Shar got married, that they and her folks were straight-up classist sharks. My gut never lies, and it was screaming that Shar and her folks were straight-up classist sharks. Saturday arrived, a crisp, cold evening. The city was all sparkling lights and hurried, elegant people. I dressed for the part. I didn't just grab an old outfit. I crafted a persona. I pulled out a shapeless polyester suit dress, a horrendous light gray number I'd snagged years ago from a vintage shop for a charity event costume. It was wrinkled, smelled faintly of mothballs, and sagged in all the wrong places. My shoes were even better. Scuffed, chunky, worn-out loafers, the kind that scream, "My feet hurt, but I can't afford better." No jewelry, not even a cheap silver band. I tied my hair back in a hasty, slightly greasy ponytail that left stray wisps around my temples. Finally, I grabbed my accessory, a faded canvas tote bag, the kind given out at a college fair, slightly stained with what looked suspiciously like old coffee. I looked in the mirror. Forgettable. Broken. Perfect. I called an Uber, not one of my fleet of luxury black cars, but a beat-up sedan driven by a college student named Tyler. As we drove toward the glittering downtown core, my phone buzzed. It was Kendra, my chief operating officer. "Boss, the Shanghai merger? Julian Hastings Farm is straight up playing hardball. They're trying to move the deadline up and cut our valuation by 14%. We need to counter them now." Kendra's voice was tight with urgency. "Tell them to hold," I replied, my voice a quiet, firm hum, nothing like the timid peep I'd been practicing. 90 minutes, Ellie. This could cost us millions." I smiled, a cold corporate smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Kendra, I earn $95K a month. Trust me, I know what $1 million is. Hold the line. This is important." I hung up and silenced the phone. Julian Hastings, Serafina's husband, the in-law I was about to meet. What an interesting coincidence. His firm, Hastings Global, was the same one trying to undercut my latest M&A deal. It just added a whole new layer of savage satisfaction to the evening. The Uber pulled up to the Gilded Crane. Warm spotlights illuminated a marble facade, and a towering doorman in a tuxedo was holding the heavy mahogany door. I paid Tyler and stepped out. I took a final steadying breath. Showtime. I walked inside with short, nervous steps, clutching the canvas tote to my chest like a shield. I spotted them immediately. Leo, bless his heart, was standing awkwardly by a long table near a panoramic window. He was in a navy suit, looking sharp but miserably anxious. Next to him was his wife, Shar. She looked flawless, a bespoke ivory dress that probably cost more than my entire apartment's rent, diamond studs that sparkled like tiny frozen stars, and hair styled with impossible precision. But she wasn't looking at me. She was glancing frantically at the entrance, her expression a mix of embarrassment and dread. Then I saw Julian and Serafina Hastings already seated, radiating an almost painful level of expensive chic. Serafina, Shar's mother, was a vision of severe elegance, a sapphire silk dress, heavy gold jewelry, and a look on her face that suggested she found the very air in the restaurant beneath her. Julian was a fortress in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a Patek Philippe watch gleaming subtly on his wrist, his expression as serious and expensive as the menu. As I approached the table, Leo saw me. His eyes went wide, scanning my sad dress and my scuffed shoes. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Mom, you made it," he stammered, his voice tight. Of course, son. Wouldn't miss it, I chirped, giving him a quick, timid smile. The smile of a woman overwhelmed by the opulence. Shar managed a quick, almost painful peck on my cheek. Mother-in-law, so nice you could come. Her eyes, however, said, "Please, dear God, disappear." She introduced me to her parents with a strained, almost apologetic rush. "Mom, Dad, this is Leo's mother, Eleanor, Ellie." Serafina looked up, and in that instant, the judgment hit me like a physical wave. Her eyes moved slowly, deliberately down my wrinkled dress, my horrible shoes, the pathetic tote bag. She didn't have to say a word. Her whole posture, the slight tilt of her head, the barely perceptible tightening of her mouth screamed disdain. She extended a hand, cold, quick, and weak. "A pleasure," she murmured. A statement, not a feeling. Julian gave a similarly weak, false, charming handshake. "Charmed," he echoed. "Clearly not." I was seated in the chair at the end of the table, the one that felt miles away, like I was an afterthought, the poor relation they'd been forced to acknowledge. No one helped me. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter arrived with the menus, leather-bound, heavy, and mostly written in French. I opened mine and immediately looked lost. I squinted, pretending to recognize none of the dishes. Serafina watched me with a predatory smile. "Do you need a little help with the menu, Ellie? It can be a little complicated if you're not used to this kind of cuisine." "Oh, yes, please. I don't know what any of these big fancy words mean. I'm usually just a meat and potatoes kind of gal." She sighed, a dramatic flutter of impatience, and took charge. "Right. Well, we don't want to get too extravagant. For Eleanor, just the simplest seasonal fish, something light, nothing that costs an arm and a leg. We're not trying to break the bank tonight." The phrase, "not trying to break the bank," hung in the air, a direct, subtle insult to my supposed poverty. Julian nodded approvingly. Leo stared intently at his water glass. Shar busied herself adjusting her silverware, and I just watched, smiling my timid, simple woman smile. Serafina immediately launched into a monologue. She started with their globe-trotting lifestyle, how exhausting the first-class flight was and how they were slumming it at a hotel that was only $1,800 a night. Then came the real topic, money. "We just stopped by the boutique on Fifth Avenue this morning," she purred, looking right at me. "Julian got me a few pieces, just a few $1,000s, nothing major. You know, Ellie, we've always been extremely meticulous with our finances, hard work, smart investments. Now we're fortunate enough to have properties in 4 countries. 4! Julian is an absolute genius with his firm, Hastings Global, and I oversee our substantial portfolio." She paused, letting the word substantial echo. Then she leaned in, her smile losing its warmth. "And you, Eleanor, what exactly is your, contribution? What do you do in that office of yours?" Her tone was sickly sweet, a poisoned sugar cube. "Oh, I do a little bit of everything. Paperwork, filing, managing supplies, simple, basic things. Just trying to keep the lights on." Serafina exchanged a knowing look with Julian. "Ah, administrative. That's totally fine. Very honest work. Every job has dignity, right?" "Of course. Dignity is a choice." The food arrived. Enormous, dramatic plates with tiny portions that looked more like abstract art than a meal. Serafina cut into her piece of Wagyu beef with surgical precision. "This little sliver, $150, she announced as if she was educating a backward child. "But it's worth it. Quality is everything. You can't just eat any old thing, can you, Ellie?" "No, ma'am, you absolutely can't," I agreed, tasting my basic overcooked fish. Leo tried to pivot the conversation, talking about a recent project at his own modest firm. Serafina steamrolled right over him. Leo, darling, does your mother really live alone in that small apartment you mentioned? Leo nodded, his face flushing. Yes, Mom's always been pretty private. Serafina leaned back, radiating theatrical pity. It must be so hard for you, Eleanor, alone at your age, limited income, not much to fall back on. Does your salary even stretch to cover all your basic expenses? The trap snapped shut. I manage, I whispered, barely audible. I save where I can. I don't need much. I'm low maintenance. Serafina sighed, a sound that could fill a stadium. Oh, Eleanor, you are truly a trooper. I admire women who just struggle through it. Although, of course, a mother always wants to give her children the best life, a leg up. But, well, everyone gives what they can afford, don't they? There it was, the subtle, soul-crushing jab. She was telling me I had failed Leo, that I hadn't given him the start he deserved, that I was a poor, insufficient mother. Shar was staring at her gold-plated fork. Leo's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. I just smiled weakly. You're right. Everyone gives what they can. Serafina continued, her voice gaining an aggressive, possessive edge. We made sure Shar had every advantage. Best schools, gap years traveling through Europe, 4 languages under her belt. And when she married Leo, we really stepped up. We handed them a straight-up gift for the down payment on their condo. It was a substantial amount, you know. We're talking $150,000. And the honeymoon? We insisted they go all out. A 4-week trip, private villas, $45,000. Easy. That's just who we are. We believe in investing in our children's stability. She looked dead in my eye, her look pure challenge. And you, Eleanor, were you able to contribute anything when they tied the knot? The question hung there, sharp as broken glass. Not much, I replied, looking down at my hands. I gave them a small gift. It was the thought that counted, I figured. Serafina gave a condescending little laugh. How sweet! Every little bit helps, doesn't it? Though, of course, the scale of the help makes a difference in the long run. We want our children to be comfortable. A controlled, icy fury began to build in my core. It wasn't the explosive kind. It was the kind that had fueled my rise to the top. Cold, surgical, and absolutely unforgiving. I kept the simple smile glued to my face and let Serafina keep talking. People like her always do. They bloviate, they brag, they reveal their own emptiness, and that's when you strike. Serafina lifted her wine glass, a crystal goblet of deep red, exclusive French vintage. $300 a bottle, this stuff, but when you know quality, you can't skimp. Do you drink wine, Eleanor? Only on holidays, and usually the box stuff. I don't really have the palate for this. Serafina actually chuckled. Oh, bless your heart. Don't worry. A trained palate comes with experience, travel, and a certain level of education. Julian and I have toured all the best vineyards. We're quite knowledgeable. Shar is learning too. She inherited the good taste. Julian nodded proudly. It's a lifestyle. And you, Eleanor? Do you have any hobbies? What do you do for fun in your limited spare time? I shrugged. I watch my old TV, cook for myself. Sometimes I take a walk in the park. Just simple stuff. Julian and Serafina exchanged a glance that said, Oh, the sheer banality. How charming, Serafina drawled. Simplicity has its place, though of course one always aspires to more, right? To see the world, to grow culturally. But, well, I suppose not everyone gets those opportunities. You're right, I agreed softly. Not everyone gets those opportunities. The dessert arrived. Serafina had ordered a dish that had a tiny sliver of something covered in edible gold flakes. "See those little golden specks? A detail only the best places offer," she boasted. I ate my plain, cheaper dessert in silence. Then Serafina's expression turned solemn, falsely intimate. "Eleanor, I think it's important that we have a little family chat now that we are all together." She focused her gaze on me, her eyes hard. "Leo is a good man. Shar loves him. But as parents, we have to look out for our daughter. We want the best for them." Leo tensed. "Serafina, I really don't think—" Serafina raised a jeweled hand, cutting him off. "Let me finish, Leo. This is important. Eleanor, I know you did your best with Leo. Raising a child alone is no joke, and I truly respect that. But Leo is at a new stage. He's married, he has a career, and they are building a life. Shar and Leo deserve stability, financial, emotional." She paused, letting the implication hang. "We've helped them substantially, and we will continue to do so. But we also feel it's essential that Leo not have unnecessary burdens." There it was, the word I knew was coming. Burden. She was calling me, his mother, a liability, a drain on their perfect upper-class life. Shar's face was a mask of shame, still staring at her plate. Leo was rigid, knuckles white under the table. "Burden?" I repeated, my voice still light, a confused little chirp. Serafina sighed condescendingly. "Don't take this the wrong way, Eleanor, but at your age, living on a limited salary, it's only natural for Leo to worry about you, to feel like he has to save you. And he's a good son for that. But we can't let that worry, that pressure, mess up his marriage. Do you catch my drift?" "Perfectly," I replied. Serafina smiled, a triumphant, viperous flash of teeth. "I knew you would. That's why Julian and I came up with an idea. We could give you a small monthly allowance, say $1,500, something that lets you live a little more comfortably without Leo having to stress so much." I remained silent, watching her, every muscle in my body coiled tight. "And," Serafina continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I'd work a spec—"
"In exchange, we would just ask you to be respectful of their space, to not call them so frequently, to not rely on them, to give them the freedom to build their future without interference." The bribe, the final, ultimate humiliation. They wanted to pay me off $1,500 a month to erase myself from my own son's life so I wouldn't contaminate their high society bubble with my poverty? "Mom, that is enough." Leo finally exploded, slamming his hand on the table. "You don't have to listen to this." Serafina waved a dismissive hand. "Leo, calm down. We're all adults here. Your mother understands, right, Eleanor?" I picked up my napkin, slowly, deliberately, and wiped my lips. I set the napkin down. I took a sip of water. The silence in the air was so thick you could cut it with a dull knife. Everyone was staring at me. Serafina with smug expectation, Julian with cold arrogance, Char with paralyzing shame, and Leo with raw desperation. Then I spoke. My voice was no longer small or timid. It was a low, resonant boardroom voice, clear, cold, and utterly authoritative. "That's an interesting proposal, Serafina. Truly very generous of you two." Serafina's victorious smile faltered slightly. "I'm glad you see it that way." I nodded slowly. "But I have a few quick questions, just for clarity." Serafina blinked. "Of course. Ask away." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "You settled on $1,500 a month, correct? For me to basically vanish from my son's life and stop being a burden." Serafina flushed, but she held her ground. I wouldn't phrase it that brutally, Eleanor, but yes, it's a form of support. No, I corrected, my voice still measured, but with an edge of steel that made Julian finally sit up straight. That is exactly how you phrased it. You want to buy my silence. Now, you mentioned the substantial investments you've made in your daughter and my son. The house down payment, that was $150,000, you said, and the honeymoon was another $45,000? Serafina, thrown by the sudden shift in my demeanor, nodded, a flicker of pride still in her eyes. Yes, we don't hold back when it comes to our children. You're right, I agree. When you love your children, you absolutely don't hold back. But tell me, Serafina, all that money you funneled into Leo and Char, what did it buy you? Did it buy you their respect? Did it buy you their actual, unforced love? Or did it just buy you their obedience, their submission? The atmosphere at the table went from tense to nuclear. Serafina's fake smile evaporated. Excuse me? I think you're getting out of line. My tone sharpened, cutting through her protest. You have spent the entire dinner bragging about money, how much things cost, how much you spent, how much you have, but you haven't asked me a single time if I was happy, if I was healthy, if I needed genuine company. You've only calculated my worth, and you landed on $1,500 a month. Serafina's face went white. I never—
Yes, you did, I interrupted her, my volume never rising, making it even more terrifying. From the second I walked in, you've been measuring my value by your wallet. And here's what I learned tonight, Serafina. The people who only talk about money are the ones who understand its true value the least, because they let it become their entire personality. Julian finally intervened, his voice booming slightly. I think you're completely misinterpreting my wife's intentions, Eleanor. You've clearly misunderstood the situation. Misinterpreted? I fixed him with a stare that had shut down hostile mergers across 5 continents. Did I misinterpret when your wife called me a burden to my own son? Did I misinterpret when you offered me alms to vanish? Did I misinterpret every snide, patronizing comment about my clothes, my job, my life? Did I misinterpret the fact that your firm, Hastings Global, is currently trying to lowball my company's Shanghai merger by 14%? Julian choked, his arrogance instantly crumbling. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Leo was staring at me, utterly stunned. Mom, please, he pleaded softly. No, Leo, I said, looking at him with quiet finality. No more pleases. I'm done being small. I sat up straight, my entire posture changing from the timid mother to the CEO. There was no shrinking left in me. I looked Serafina directly in the eye. She flinched, looking away instantly. The power dynamic in the room had just flipped like a table. Serafina, you said you admire women who struggle alone, who are brave. Let me ask you this. Have you ever actually struggled alone? Have you ever had to build something, anything, with your own 2 hands, without Julian's bank account or your family safety net? I have my own accomplishments. I manage our investment portfolio. I oversee properties. Properties Julian bought, I finished for her, my voice gentle but deadly. Investments made with money Julian generated. Am I wrong? There's a difference, a massive difference, between managing an empire you were handed and building one brick by bloody brick. Don't you think? Julian, his face red with annoyance, spat. That's not fair. My wife is a hard worker. I don't doubt she works hard, I replied, calmly. But I doubt she knows what true struggle is. Let me tell you what true struggle is, Julian.
40 years ago, I was 22. I was a secretary in a tiny dead-end firm, earning minimum wage. I lived in a rat trap of a rented room. I was alone, completely alone. Leo was glued to my words. He'd never heard this story in any detail. I got pregnant one day. The father bailed. My family disowned me. I chose to keep going. I worked until the day I gave birth, and I was back at my desk 2 weeks later pumping milk in the supply closet. A kind elderly neighbor took care of Leo. I worked 12-hour days. But I didn't stay a secretary. I studied at night, online, by public library light. Accounting, finance, administration. I became an expert in systems and logistics that no one taught me. All while raising a child, all while budgeting pennies for food, rent, and diapers. I paused, letting the scope of those 20 years sink in. Serafina was staring at the water carafe, her arrogance shriveled. I didn't stop, I said, a wave of pride finally washing over the cold anger. From secretary to assistant to coordinator to regional manager to director, it took me 20 years of nonstop grinding, thankless sacrifice, but I did it. And now, Julian, Serafina, I don't earn enough to cover my expenses. I earn $95,000 a month. The silence that followed was total, deafening. Leo dropped his fork with a clatter. Her eyes were saucers. Julian's jaw went slack in absolute panic disbelief. Serafina looked like she'd been struck by lightning. 95,000, I repeated, making the number loud and clear. Every month. For the last 18 years. That's a total gross career income well over $25 million, not counting my investment portfolio, which is extensive. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Global Nexus Logistics. I oversee 5 major global markets. I manage budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I sign the contracts that decide whether your firm, Julian, even gets to play in the big leagues. Julian's face was now a sickly gray. He didn't just look shocked. He looked professionally ruined. Mom, why? Why did you never tell me that? I looked at my son with genuine love. Because you didn't need to know, son. I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not inheritance. I wanted you to become a good person, not an entitled heir. Money corrupts, and I wasn't going to let it touch your soul. Char finally spoke, her voice a thin, shaky thread. Then why the small apartment? The old clothes, the Ford pickup. I smiled, a genuine, powerful smile this time, because I don't need to impress anyone, Charlotte. True wealth isn't a billboard. It's a choice. And I came here dressed like this tonight, acting simple, because I wanted to see how you would treat someone who had nothing. I wanted to see the true colors of my son's new family. And boy, did I get an eyeful. You put on a hell of a performance, Serafina. Serafina was trembling, her expensive emerald dress suddenly looking cheap under the weight of her humiliation. This is a straight-up lie. If you earned that kind of money, we would know. Leo would know. I let him believe it, I replied, cold and steady, because I live simply. I invest. I save. I multiply. I don't waste it on flashy gold chains or trying to one-up a stranger at a dinner table. And as for your firm's Shanghai deal, Julian, you should know that I was the one who personally issued the internal memo to my acquisition team to shut down your counteroffer last week. That's not just money. That's power. And you just tried to buy off my son's mother for $1,500 a month. You were looking at the CEO who controls a quarter of your firm's market share, and you saw a beggar.
Julian cleared his throat, regaining a fraction of his composure. Even so, you were deliberately misleading. You acted in bad faith. Misleading? I looked at him, unblinking. You gave me a blank canvas and you painted a masterpiece of snobbery. Did I mislead you when you called me a burden? Did I mislead you when you offered me alms to vanish? No! You exposed yourself. You did it magnificently. I stood up. I was no longer the small woman. I was tall, commanding, filling the space with my authority. There was no shrinking left in me. I looked Serafina directly in the eye. She flinched, looking away instantly. Let me tell you something I know you've never been told. Money doesn't buy class. It doesn't buy empathy. It doesn't buy education. You have millions, perhaps more than me, but you don't have an ounce of what truly matters. And you know what the final twist is, Julian? Julian just stared.
You called my life simple. You're right. It is. It's simple because I don't need a $300 bottle of wine to feel valuable. You need those things to hide your emptiness. You need the jewels, the properties, the titles. You're trying to use money to buy love and respect from my son, while I was simply trying to teach him to earn his own. I built my fortune from scratch. You just spent one that was already there. I earned respect. You buy it. I have dignity. You have bank accounts. I reached into my canvas tote bag, the one that had held my pathetic little props, and pulled out a black card, heavier than expected, engraved with my name and title. The company's highest tier corporate platinum card. I dropped it on the table in front of a horrified Serafina. This is my personal corporate card. Unlimited limit. Pay for the dinner with this. And leave the waitstaff a killer tip. Consider it a parting gift from the simple mother you tried to make disappear. Serafina stared at the card. Eleanor Vance, CEO, Global Nexus Logistics. Her composure finally snapped, giving way to raw panic and shame. I don't need your money, she stammered, her voice a defeated rasp. I know, I replied, picking up my tote bag, but I didn't need your pity either. Yet you shoveled it down my throat all night. Take this as a lesson in basic manners, something your world travels apparently failed to teach you. Julian was pale with rage. Enough! You are disrespecting us. Respect? I shot back. Where was your respect when you asked if my meager salary was enough to keep me alive? Where was it when you suggested I was a liability to my son? Your wife didn't want to help Julian. She wanted to control. She wanted to eliminate the poor link in her perfect family chain. She just chose the wrong link. I turned to Shar. She was openly weeping now, her perfect makeup dissolving into streaks. Mother-in-law? I swear I didn't know they would. Stop. I cut her off gently. You didn't know about my money, that's true, but you knew your parents. You know how they treat people they deem inferior, and you were silent. Shar, you are not responsible for who your parents are, but you are 100% responsible for how you act. Leo rushed to me, tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for assuming, for being a coward. I hugged him tight. You have nothing to apologize for, Leo. I did this so you would be independent, and you worried about me. That's a huge win. You showed empathy, son. That's a lesson money can't buy. I pulled back from Leo and took my final, purposeful steps toward the exit. I paused at the door. Oh, Serafina? I called back to the defeated woman sitting at the table. You mentioned you speak 4 languages. How impressive. But I only need one, the language of truth, to expose the fact that the only thing you're rich in is contempt. I walked out of the Gilded Crane, leaving a silence behind me far more expensive than any wine on the menu. I stepped out of the Gilded Crane, and the cool night air of the city hit me, clean, sharp, and invigorating. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind me, silencing the chaos I'd just created.
It felt less like a dramatic exit and more like closing a chapter that had been long overdue. For decades, I had played the role of the humble martyr, the simple, honest mom, all for the sake of Leo's character development. Tonight, that character had died, incinerated by Serafina's sheer, magnificent arrogance.
I didn't call an Uber. I walked. My ugly, scuffed loafers hit the pavement rhythmically. I needed the kinetic energy to process the adrenaline that was still humming through my veins. The street was an endless parade of luxury cars and high-end boutiques. But for the first time in years, I didn't see the price tags. I only saw the performance I'd just given. It wasn't about the money. It was about the power of the truth. I pulled out my phone. It was exactly 9:48 p.m. I called Kendra, my COO, using the secure line. She answered instantly, her voice strained. "Ellie, what the hell is going on? Julian Hastings just called me. He's absolutely unhinged. He said he was having dinner with you and that you accused him of trying to undercut the Shanghai deal?" "He wasn't wrong," I said, my voice calm, the mom voice completely gone, replaced by the CEO's low, even command. "Kendra, I need you to initiate Protocol Chimera immediately." Kendra sucked in a breath. Protocol Chimera was our nuclear option, a hostile, rapid acquisition playbook designed to leverage a target firm's public market instability and internal division, crushing them before they could mount a defense. It had been gathering dust for years. "Ellie, that's a full-scale takeover of Hastings Global. That firm is $18 billion. That's a war, not an acquisition. Are you serious? Over a failed dinner meeting?" "Kendra, this is not about the dinner meeting. This is about their ethics. They tried to strong-arm us on Shanghai, and Julian showed tonight he has zero integrity. We don't partner with snakes, we crush them. Now, you hold the line on the Shanghai valuation, but I want you to start buying Hastings Global stock, quietly. I want 35% of their public float secured by morning. Call the board, tell them I'm on a personal matter, but this is a unanimous executive decision. This ends Julian Hastings' reign before he sees sunrise. And Kendra, yes, boss, I want the most aggressive, blood-in-the-water team on this. No mercy. And when we present the acquisition offer, I want it to be $1 per share over market, just enough to be legal, but so insultingly low it makes his blood boil. Get it done." "Done, boss. You got it. Wow." I hung up, feeling a grim satisfaction. Julian had spent the night trying to buy my silence for $1,500. By morning, I would own his silence and his entire miserable company. That was real power. My phone rang again. It was Leo. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This call would be harder than the corporate war I'd just started. "Mom, where are you? I'm coming to get you. I don't even know what to say. This is absolutely insane." His voice was a wrong mixture of awe, horror, and confusion. "I'm walking home, sweetie. And no, don't come here. Not yet. I need a minute. More importantly, you need a minute. You need to look at that dinner, look at Shar, look at yourself, and process what you just witnessed. This isn't a game. This is the truth about who your mother is, and the truth about who you married. You want answers? You'll get them tomorrow. Come to the apartment alone at 11 a.m. Bring coffee. We need to talk. Truly talk. For the first time in 34 years. But Mom, how could you keep this from me? All the lies, the struggle." It wasn't a lie. It was a choice, a necessary one. And it wasn't a struggle, not for me. It was an investment in you. Now, go home. Don't let Shar or her parents talk you out of what you saw tonight. Think for yourself. I love you, son. See you tomorrow." I hung up. I could afford a black car service, but I kept walking, enjoying the anonymity of the night.
My sensible shoes, which had felt like shackles hours ago, now felt like grounded anchors. I was Eleanor Vance, the woman who had conquered her life, the CEO, the simple living, multimillionaire, truth-wielding, badass mom. The next morning, the apartment felt small but safe. The modest, slightly chipped kitchen table, the worn sofa, the dated wallpaper. It was all a shell, but it was my shell, built on integrity. At 10:55 a.m., Leo showed up. He didn't knock. He just stood there, leaning in the doorway, holding 2 large paper cups of coffee. He was in jeans and a hoodie, his face pale and drawn, looking more like the scared kid he once was than the successful 30-something he'd become. "I got your coffee," he muttered, walking in and placing them both on the table. "Thanks, honey. Have a seat." He didn't sit. He started pacing, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, this is bonkers. I woke up and I thought it was a nightmare. Then I checked the news. Global Nexus Logistics is on every single financial channel. There's chatter about a hostile takeover of Hastings Global. The stock is tanking. And every single article mentions the CEO, Eleanor Vance. That's you. Mom, what the hell?" He stopped pacing, his eyes wide. "You're a legend, a corporate shark. You're the one who wrote the definitive book on supply chain ethics that we all had to read in college. I cited you in my thesis. You're the Ellie Vance." I smiled softly. "The very same. I go by Eleanor when I'm being serious, Ellie when I'm getting coffee." He sat down heavily, resting his elbows on his knees, his head shaking slowly. "Why didn't you tell me? All those years I thought you were barely scraping by. I was trying to send you a little money every month. I was worried about you being a burden on me." He laughed, a raw, bitter sound. "The irony is staggering." "I know, Leo. Sit down. Drink your coffee. We need to unpack this." I sat opposite him, and for the next hour, I told him the whole truth, the full, unvarnished story of my rise. I told him about the poverty, the betrayal, the shame, and the vow I made to myself that my success would be my secret shield, that my money would only be used for good, and that my son would never, ever be defined by the size of my bank account. "When you're born rich, you learn how to spend money," I explained, my voice low and earnest. "When you earn it, starting from zero, you learn to respect it. I saw too many kids growing up entitled, waiting for their parents to die so they could cash in. That was never going to be you. I wanted you to learn that the satisfaction is in the climb, not the view from the top. I wanted you to hustle because you needed to, not because it was a hobby. You have a good job, Leo. You're respected. You're kind. You're you. That's my multi-million-dollar victory, not the stock market." Leo was quiet for a long time, sipping his coffee, his eyes wet. "I get it, Mom. I do. But it still hurts that I had to find out this way. I feel like you never trusted me." "I trusted your character, Leo. I didn't trust money. Money changes people, sweetie. I protected you from the kind of people who would only be your friend because I'm a CEO. I protected you from the kind of woman who would only love you because your mother is rich. And speaking of that," I leaned back. "What about Shar? What's the temperature there?" Shar's face hardened. "She's a mess. She's ecstatic about the money, but she's furious that I didn't know. She's on the phone with her parents nonstop. They're losing their minds.
Julian's firm is in free fall. Char's worried about her inheritance. Ah, inheritance, I noted, the word tasting sour on my tongue. So, is she worried about you, or is she worried about the lifestyle her parents' wealth afforded her? Both, I guess, but mostly the second one. He sighed, sounding exhausted. She keeps asking if you can bail out her parents' firm now that you're buying it. She thinks it's all a big joke, a massive power play she can leverage. Does she? My expression was cold. Well, she's about to get a lesson in the difference between a power play and an ethical cleansing. Just then, there was a frantic, insistent knock on the door. Leo's head shot up. "That's her," he murmured, defeated. "Let her in," I said, standing up. "The three of us need to have a little family meeting." Char burst into the room, her composure totally shattered. She was wearing designer yoga pants and an expensive puffer coat, but her eyes were red and her makeup was patchy. She didn't look at me. She went straight to Leo, grabbing his arm. "Leo, you have to tell her. She has to stop this. My dad called me crying. He's losing everything. His firm, our houses, the whole legacy. Your mom is acting like a straight-up sociopath. We have to stop her. We're family now." Leo gently pulled his arm away. "Char, stop. Listen to yourself. You're asking her to stop a legitimate corporate acquisition because you don't want your father to face the consequences of his own bad faith." Char finally turned to me, her face shifting from panic to a forced, sickly sweetness. "Eleanor, Mom, look, I was completely out of line last night. My parents were monsters. They were awful. Please, I'm begging you. Forgive them. Forgive me. I love Leo, and I want us to be a real family, a real rich family. Think of the potential, the synergy. We could be unstoppable. We could partner. You, Julian, me, Leo, the four of us." She was pitching me a corporate partnership while her father's empire was burning, and she did it with the practiced glossy enthusiasm of a saleswoman. "Char, sit down," I instructed, my voice flat. She obeyed, perched on the edge of the sofa. "Here's the deal, Char. This isn't a power play I can reverse. This isn't a petty squabble I can forgive. This is business. Julian tried to manipulate my company's valuation, which is a breach of trust. He showed me he has no ethics, and in the world I operate in, ethics are everything. I am not stopping the acquisition. Hastings Global is done. Period." Char's eyes welled up. "But what about the $150,000 down payment? What about the $45,000 honeymoon? It all came from them. If they lose everything, we have to give it back. We're financially intertwined." "We're back to the money," I noted, crossing my arms. "Char, you and Leo have built a life in that condo. You earned your way into that marriage. I'm not going to let your parents' toxic money ruin your home. Consider those gifts a sunk cost I will personally absorb." Char blinked, her expression a mix of relief and utter confusion. "You'll absorb it? You mean you'll replace it? You'll give us the money to cover those gifts?" "No," I said simply. "I will make a personal, 7-figure donation to a reputable, transparent charity in your name and Leo's to cover those amounts and then some. The money Julian gave you was tainted by his arrogance. My money will be clean, and I'm going to use this opportunity to find out what kind of wife and woman you truly are."
I paused and let my gaze sweep over both of them. This is my test, Shar. And Leo, you're in it too. I'm not going to hand you a trust fund. I'm not going to buy you a mansion. That would make you soft. But I am going to challenge you. I have a new subsidiary, a brand new nonprofit venture focused on ethical supply chain management and sustainable tech. It's small, it's new, and it has almost no funding yet. It's called the Phoenix Project.
I looked at Shar. Shar, you said you speak 4 languages. You have a degree in international relations. You've traveled the world. You're intelligent. I want you to run the operations for the Phoenix Project, full-time, no massive salary, but a good, ethical wage. You have to start from the bottom, write the grant applications, secure the first major partnership, and get that nonprofit profitable enough to survive. I turned to Leo. Leo, your job is secure, but I want you to step up. I want you to be the chairman of the nonprofit's advisory board. You'll use your current skills, but you will dedicate 20 hours a week to mentoring Shar and making sure the Phoenix Project succeeds. You will work together. You will build something good, with no inheritance, no massive funding, just grit and sweat. You will prove to me and to each other that your worth isn't based on your parents' wallets. I gave them the ultimatum. You both have 48 hours to decide. If you accept, you will work harder than you ever have. If you quit, I will know you only wanted the cash. If you decline, I will never speak of my wealth again, and you will be on your own. Your life will continue as it was. But if you take this on, you prove to me that you have the ethics and the integrity to be my family. Choose. Shar looked at me, not with gratitude, but with calculation. She looked at the small apartment and then back at the memory of my corporate card. And if we succeed, Mom, what then? What's the reward? The reward, I said, looking her dead in the eye, is your dignity. It's your husband's pride. And it's the peace of mind that comes from knowing you built something real. It's what I built this whole life for. Leo didn't hesitate. I'm in, Mom. This is what I've been needing, a chance to prove I'm not just waiting for a handout. He took Shar's hand. Shar, we have to do this. We have to be better than them. Shar looked at her husband, then at me. Her mouth worked for a moment, and then a strange, determined look crossed her face. She was making a choice. Not a choice for love or integrity, but a choice to play the long game. She wanted the prize. Fine, I'm in. I'll make the Phoenix Project the biggest nonprofit in the world. Just watch me. I nodded. It wasn't a perfect response, but it was enough to start. The test had begun. The next few weeks were a corporate symphony of brutal efficiency. Global Nexus Logistics was a machine, and Protocol Chimera was humming. Julian Hastings was being squeezed from every angle. His stock was bought up, his key partners were poached by my team, and the media was having a field day, painting him as the arrogant dinosaur who had met his match. I got weekly updates from Kendra. Week 1. Julian publicly denied any acquisition talks, calling the GNL reports malicious slander. My team filed a $40 million lawsuit against him for attempted contract tampering. Week 2. Julian's CFO quit, citing irreconcilable differences and an ethical crisis within the firm. My team secured 48% of the public stock. Week 3. Julian called me. He actually called me. I let him stew in the hold music for 10 minutes, listening to the canned corporate jazz. When I picked up, he was begging. Eleanor, what do you want? This is insane. You're going to bankrupt me. You're destroying a 40-year legacy over a petty insult at dinner? It was not petty, Julian. It was exposure. You revealed your true character, and my company does not align with your character. You tried to ruin a contract. I'm just finishing the job. I want your resignation, effective immediately, and I want a full, written confession of your firm's ethical violations in the Shanghai deal. Never. I'll fight you in court. This is personal. You're just a vengeful woman, he yelled. You're right, Julian. It's personal.
And I'm not just a vengeful woman. I'm the CEO who's about to own your debt. You have 48 hours to sign the papers, or I will initiate a total liquidation and you will walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back. Your choice." I hung up. Meanwhile, Shar was throwing herself into the Phoenix Project. She wasn't doing it with passion. She was doing it with a desperate, manic intensity. She secured a small initial grant, used her contacts to find cheap office space, and leveraged her foreign language skills to set up meetings with international partners. She was brilliant, driven, and absolutely focused on making the project huge, a massive, public success that would prove her worth to me. Leo, for his part, was a steadying force, ensuring the ethical backbone of the organization remained sound. They were working together, but I could tell their motivations were still worlds apart. Leo was working for integrity, Shar was working for inheritance. It was the end of the 4th week. Julian's final deadline was approaching. The takeover papers were ready. I was sitting in my sleek executive office, looking out at the skyline I secretly owned, when Kendra walked in, her face grave. "Ellie, we have a major problem. Julian didn't sign the papers. He did something much worse. He filed a restraining order against you, claiming harassment, corporate espionage, and, this is the kicker, he's claiming you have a personal, illegal vendetta against him, citing an incident from 30 years ago involving corporate theft." I leaned back in my chair, suddenly very still. Theft? What kind of theft? Kendra looked down her tablet. "He's claiming you stole the original business plan for Global Nexus Logistics, the entire supply chain model, from him back in the late 1990s, when you were a secretary. He's claiming he was your mentor, and you betrayed him. He even provided a signed, notarized document from 1996 detailing the project signed by a Franklin Vance." My blood ran cold. Franklin Vance, Leo's biological father, the man who had abandoned me and Leo, the man I had never spoken of. I picked up the tablet and looked at the signature on the old document. It was a crude, hastily signed name on a blueprint that was, without a doubt, the genesis of Global Nexus Logistics. "Kendra," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "the man you call Franklin Vance? That was Leo's father. He was a low-level programmer in the same small firm I worked for. And he didn't mentor me or steal from me. He was the thief. He stole my original business idea, the one I developed in my spare time while pregnant, and tried to sell it as his own. When I refused to marry him because he was a narcissistic slug, he took the blueprint, signed it with his name, and ran off. He thought he could get rich and leave me and Leo to starve." I slammed the tablet down. "And now Julian Hastings has this document. Why? How?" Kendra pointed to a small, nearly invisible note at the bottom of the 1996 document. Franklin Vance sold the rights to this stolen plan to a junior partner at his next job in 1997. Guess who that junior partner was, Ellie? Julian Hastings. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Julian wasn't just a random, arrogant executive. He was a low-level thief who had built his empire, Hastings Global, on the back of the very idea Franklin stole from me, my idea. He saw my work, bought the fraudulent rights, and used it as his stepping stone. When I refused to marry him because he was a narcissistic slug, he took the blueprint, signed it with his name, and ran off. He thought he could get rich and leave me and Leo to starve. I slammed the tablet down. And now, Julian Hastings has this document. Why? How? Kendra pointed to a small, nearly invisible note at the bottom of the 1996 document. Franklin Vance sold the rights to this stolen plan to a junior partner at his next job in 1997. Guess who that junior partner was, Ellie? Julian Hastings. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Julian wasn't just a random, arrogant executive. He was a low-level thief who had built his empire, Hastings Global, on the back of the very idea Franklin stole from me, my idea. He saw my work, bought the fraudulent rights, and used it as his stepping stone. When I refused to marry him, he thought he was being clever. He thought that document was his shield. He's wrong. It's his suicide note. Find me every single record from that original firm, the 1996 payroll, the employee ID badges, the server login times, everything. Kendra worked through the night. The next morning, she brought me a single, crisp, decades-old document authenticated by a forensic archivist. It was the 1996 firm's employee login ledger. I held it in my hand. My retribution was now absolute. The emergency court hearing was set for 4 p.m. that day. Julian had rushed to the highest court, demanding an immediate injunction to stop the GNL takeover, waving the stolen blueprint document like a flag. The entire financial world was watching. Julian stood with his high-priced lawyer, looking smug and triumphant. Serafina was in the gallery, her face an expression of righteous, vengeful satisfaction. Julian's lawyer spoke, his voice booming across the courtroom. "Your Honor, we have irrefutable proof that the entire foundation of Global Nexus Logistics, the multi-billion-dollar empire run by Ms. Vance, is based on a stolen corporate blueprint, initially developed by a former associate of my client, Mr. Franklin Vance, and subsequently purchased and protected by Mr. Hastings. Ms. Vance is not just engaged in corporate malfeasance, she is engaged in a decades-old campaign of personal, illegal vengeance rooted in personal animosity. We request an immediate freeze on all GNL assets and a full investigation into Ms. Vance's actions." The lawyer held up the signed 1996 document. Julian looked directly at me and smirked. My lawyer, a quiet, brilliant woman named Dana, stood up. "Your Honor, we deny all claims. My client, Miss Vance, has a completely clean corporate record, but since Mr. Hastings has decided to bring up the events of 1996, we are prepared to enter into evidence a single document that will not only refute Mr. Hastings' claims, but will prove his entire career is built on a fraud so vast and deep, it will rock this courtroom." Dana walked up to the judge's bench and presented the old, thin ledger. Dana began, her voice calm and authoritative. "Your Honor, Mr. Hastings claims the original blueprint was developed by Mr. Franklin Vance and that he subsequently purchased the rights to it. Mr. Hastings is relying on a document signed by a man who had already been fired from the company 3 weeks before that document was dated. We have here the official, notarized employee login ledger from the firm in question, dated 1996. On the date that Mr. Franklin Vance supposedly signed this document, he was not only terminated for cause, but his employee ID was flagged as inactive." The courtroom erupted. Julian shot up from his seat, shouting, "That's a forgery! It's a plant!" The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Counsel, continue." Dana waited until the room was silent, then delivered the final shattering blow. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have testimony, a recorded deposition from the firm's lead programmer at the time, stating that the login code for the main design server was only accessed on the day the blueprint was finalized, and that access was recorded under employee ID 328XV, not Franklin Vance's ID. Employee ID 328XV, Your Honor, belonged to Eleanor Vance." She pointed a finger at Julian. "Mr. Hastings is not the victim of a personal vendetta. He is an opportunistic thief who purchased a stolen idea from a disgruntled former employee 30 years ago and built a fraudulent empire on a foundation of lies. The personal vengeance he speaks of is simply a victim finally demanding justice. GNL is not built on stolen work. GNL is the true, legitimate owner of that intellectual property. Mr. Hastings is guilty of corporate fraud, theft of IP, and defamation." Julian's color drained entirely. He was finished. His lie, his secret, the core of his entire fortune was exposed. He was not just losing his company,
He was facing criminal charges and the utter collapse of his reputation. I rose from my seat, and the whole courtroom's eyes were on me. I didn't shout, I didn't gloat. I spoke to the judge, but my words were for Julian. Your Honor, I ask for the immediate lifting of the injunction and the completion of the acquisition. I will personally ensure that all of Hastings Global's loyal employees are kept on, but the toxic leadership, built on 30 years of theft, must be purged. I also request that all documents related to this 30-year fraud be made public so the world knows that the truth always wins. The judge didn't hesitate. He lifted the injunction. Julian Hastings was done.
The next day, I was sitting in my apartment watching the news report on the total, humiliating collapse of Hastings Global. Julian had been arrested outside the courthouse. Serafina was hysterical, her perfect life evaporating on live television. Leo came in holding 2 fresh coffees. He looked relaxed, happy, and immensely proud. "He did it, Mom. You were incredible. You didn't just beat him, you eradicated him. You avenged 30 years of injustice. I still can't believe you're the Eleanor Vance." "I'm just Eleanor, son. The CEO is just a job. The mother is who I am." "What about Shar?" he asked, his voice softening. I looked at him. "She's at the Phoenix Project office. It's been 6 weeks. How is she doing? And be honest." Leo sighed. "She's working her tail off. She's brilliant, Mom. She secured the first major partnership with a Swedish logistics firm, a contact she made herself. But she's also miserable. She hates the grind. She hates the low salary. She hates that she can't buy a new watch. She talks nonstop about how much money we're losing by not leveraging your wealth. She sees the Phoenix Project not as a good cause, but as a hurdle she has to jump to get the inheritance." I nodded. It was the answer I expected. Shar was not inherently evil, but she was fundamentally materialistic. She hadn't changed. She was just disciplined enough to fake it. The phone rang. It was Shar. I put her on speaker. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you. I did it. I secured the Swedish partnership. I've made the Phoenix Project a success. Now, can we stop playing this silly little game? Julian is going to jail. His firm is gone. I'm homeless. My life is ruined. You wanted me to prove my worth, and I did. Now, cut the check. I need a new place to live, and I need a serious allowance. I earned it." I looked at Leo. He was staring at the speaker, his face etched with pain and resignation. The last 6 weeks of hard work and bonding had been completely erased by a single mercenary statement. I picked up the phone. "Shar, you made the Phoenix Project successful. I give you that. You are a genius in business, ruthless and effective. But you failed the test." "Failed? Are you kidding me? How can you say I failed?" she shrieked. "You failed because you saw a nonprofit dedicated to ethical change and sustainability as a means to a paycheck. You didn't work for the mission. You worked for the money you thought was waiting for you. You learned how to get money, but you never learned how to value what money can't buy: empathy, kindness, and self-sufficiency. You were waiting for the inheritance. You were waiting for a man, first your father, then your husband, now me, to pay your way. That's a fundamental sickness I cannot cure. I'm your daughter-in-law. You owe me this." "I owe you nothing, Shar. I only owe Leo my love, and he deserves a partner who sees him as the prize, not my bank account. You can keep your job at the Phoenix Project. You can use your salary to support yourself, but you are no longer welcome in my family. The marriage is over." Shar screamed. The sound distorted and raw through the phone. She demanded money, she threatened exposure, she swore vengeance. I didn't flinch. I just handed the phone to Leo.
She's yours now, son. Finish this. Leo took the phone, his hand trembling slightly. He looked me in the eyes, and I saw a man who had finally found his own strength. Shar, he said, his voice flat and steady. Mom's right. I'm proud of the work you did, but I can't live this lie anymore. It's over. You can keep the condo. I'll walk away from it. I don't want tainted money. I want a clean start. I'm moving out tonight. Don't call me again. He hung up, took a deep breath, and looked at me, a single tear tracking down his cheek. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen it sooner. I was blinded by the flash. I stood up and hugged him, a true, deep hug that was worth more than all the stock on the market. It's okay, son. You were blinded by a performance. We all get fooled sometimes, but you found the light. That's what matters. Leo moved out that day and got a small, modest apartment close to mine. He continued to serve on the advisory board of the Phoenix Project, dedicating his time to turning it into the ethical powerhouse I envisioned. Shar took the condo, cashed out her remaining bank accounts, and was last seen trying to leverage her fleeting fame as the former daughter-in-law of the Eleanor Vance to start a luxury lifestyle brand. She failed. She was smart, but she had no soul. Julian and Serafina lost everything. My firm was not just an executioner, it was a reformer. We absorbed their assets, cleaned out the rot, and turned the newly acquired company into a model of ethical business practices. A month later, Leo and I were sitting in my small, sunlit apartment, eating my famous, budget-friendly chili. He looked at me, a mischievous smile on his face. So, Mom, he said, wiping his mouth, the other day I was looking at that hideous framed print in the hallway, the one with the ships. I saw a corner of the frame was cracked. I looked inside. Is that a signed Picasso lithograph? I just smiled, taking a slow sip of water. Maybe. I told you I have a few side investments. He laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. You're absolutely unbelievable. The Picasso, the climate-controlled warehouse downtown full of art, the Ford pickup, the millions in the bank. You're the most incredible human I've ever met. Leo, let me tell you the truth, the real truth about my wealth. Real power isn't about how much you have. It's about how much you control. It's not the dollar amount. It's the peace that comes from knowing you earned every single penny and that your happiness isn't dependent on anyone else's approval. And what about the inheritance, Mom? He asked, a serious look in his eyes. I reached out and took his hand. The inheritance, Leo, isn't cash. It's the lesson. It's the example. You have the blueprint now, not the stolen one, but the real one. Integrity over income, grit over guilt, and authenticity over anything else. That's worth more than any corporate empire. I'm going to make you proud, Mom. I'm going to build my own empire, clean and ethical, just like yours. You already have, son. You built it when you walked away from Shar's entitlement and Julian's lies. That's the greatest fortune a mother could ever ask for. I finally had it all. My empire, my integrity, my justice, and most importantly, my son's unconditional respect. I never had to pretend again. I was simply Eleanor Vance, CEO, mother, survivor, and a woman who had, with a simple, wrinkled dress and a canvas tote, exposed the truth about who was truly rich and who was truly poor.